And now, your go-to source for year-round fantasy hockey advice, DFS, and betting coverage. This is NHL Fantasy on Ice, presented by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
Never mind the Gretzky record at this rate, Alex Ovechkin at the ripe age of 39 could be in the running for both the Hart Trophy and the Rocket Richard. Brought to you by our good friends over at Skip. It's time for another episode of NHL Fantasy on Ice. Week 7 waiver wire edition. Nick Alberga and Jake Hahn with you. What's going on, Jake?
Not much, Nick. Some things never change. Ovechkin at the top of the goal-scoring list once again in the year 2024. Another thing that doesn't change is these episodes being brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip.
Nicely done, Jake. I was going to say Alex Ovechkin empty netters, but clearly I think you hit the nail on the head with that breakdown. And the other thing I thought about on Sunday, imagine Carolina traded Martin Necas.
Oh, man. And I remember this conversation in the offseason, and I was kind of on the fence, to be completely honest. I just thought, okay, Carolina's so spread out. How much do you really need Martin Necas? And they give him the bridge deal. And, man, this is something to be said for guys signing these short-term prove-it type contracts, right? You see how motivated he is out there, Nick? I mean, what a fantasy monster. He has just been awesome this year. So if you spent a mid-round pick on the old Marty party, it's been going steady all year.
Through 17 games, Carolina 13-4. Martin Necas has been a big reason why, and I always love the narrative when you count a team out, that's when they play their best hockey, and so far that's been the theme and story for the Carolina Hurricanes, who have had some struggles and some concerns in between the pipes. But yeah, lots happening in the fantasy hockey world. We're going to get to your waiver wire for this week. Again, an interesting schedule, which we're going to break down a bit later on, but I had to bring that up off the top. It's just Alex Ovechkin, how he's defying logic, and he's getting closer and closer to Wayne Gretzky now, Jake.
I don't know if it was you or Pete that brought it up on an episode recently about him maybe a little sprinkle for the Rocket Richard, and I remember thinking, like, okay, yeah, it's a good season, but to actually win that award and go up against some of these beasts, and it is a messy race right now, and it's very early in the season, but watching the little extra step he's got this year compared to last year, and also the supporting cast in Washington, the fact that he's got some players to play with that can maybe take a little bit of the pressure off him. I'm not putting actual money down on it, Nick, but I'm saying it's a possibility. I mean, he could score in bunches. We just saw the hat trick on Sunday. Why not? Ovechkin stay in this rocket race all season long.
Look, I don't know what he's on. Is it Ozempic? Is it something else? The guy's fired on all cylinders right now. 39 years old and just scoring and scoring and scoring. The Dylan Strome story is incredible as well. And since we're on the topic of Rocket Richard, a name I really liked coming into this season was Connor Bedard, man. But watching the game over the weekend, like, he's not even getting chances. His return to Vancouver, he's got 3 goals in 18 now, on pace for 14 measly goals. Is this the same Connor Bedard from last season? I know he really doesn't have some winger help. His buddy Taylor Hall was a health bomb against Vancouver. What's going on here, Jake?
I wanted to get into this with you and ask you pretty much the same question. Can we expect this to turn around? Is there, when you watch him, it's not like, okay, this guy's about to pop, right? When you could see guys struggling, but you go, okay, well, he had 5 or 6 shots. He was all over the ice. When you watch him, it's just he doesn't seem effective out there, and he's not getting into those shooting areas. So I don't know if it's trying to find maybe a better line combination for him. Obviously, Chicago's a little bit hampered with who they can play him with, but if you're supposed to be that good, I mean, you make space for yourself, and you could kind of take shifts over on your own, and we're just not seeing it. And fantasy owners got to be sweating this one a little bit right now, Nick, because a lot of people jumped up early to take Bedard in year 2.
You know where he's going to find a new line combination? On July 1, 2025, because they don't got much there. Like, Bertuzzi's not really working out offensively. Teravainen, they've tried like 83 different wingers for Connor Bedard. Having said all of that, Jake, I'm in the company that this guy is so elite, he's going to figure it out. Like, you look at some of the best shots in the NHL right now, I would say Bedard top 3, if not top 5. One day I think he could have the best shot in the league in general. But I think this is your classic prototypical sophomore slump. And then on top of that, like, he is the only legit player, with all due respect to anybody on that roster, who has the game-breaking abilities. Like, you think about it from the perspective of the opposition game planning against Chicago right now. Do you think it's that difficult?
Do you think this is a buy low opportunity now on Bedard from a yeah? Because it's like, it feels like this stock is about as low as it could possibly get. Like, I thought it would turn around over these last few games. It hasn't. We're still sitting on 3 goals. The shots aren't even there. So if you're a fantasy owner right now, you're thinking, okay, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe he's still too young, not on a great Blackhawks team. So I'd like to maybe look elsewhere and trade him off. So I don't hate this as a buy low opportunity, because I think you could really lowball somebody on Bedard.
You know who's watching right now? Mikko Rantanen and Mitch Marner, who could be UFAs on July 1. That price tag continues to go up and up for those two. Got to get to the Boston Bruins situation. I know in our daily chat here via iMessage, you bring up the Boston Bruins. The Montgomery watch has to be on just because of the standards this team holds, right? Every year, Jake, they're in the top of the standings. This year has been a different story. And I think the curious part for me, Jake, is the crease, like Jeremy Swayman. Yeah. And I wonder what kind of impact the impasse in terms of contract had in the preseason, because his start has not been good. 5-6-2, 3.35, 888. Like, let's not forget, this is a guy many perceived as a top 3 option in between the pipes going into the fantasy season.
I actually thought the Corpedo played quite well over the weekend as well on Saturday. I know it was in a losing effort, Nick, but I mean, they got dominated in that game. That did not look like the Boston Bruins whatsoever. And he made some big saves just to even get them to OT, and ultimately they lose that game. So I would be a little bit worried if I'm a Swayman owner that, you know, maybe we start to see a little bit more of a split between the two guys. It's still going to be a lean towards Swayman. Obviously, he's the guy there. But we have basically kind of seen 3 starts Swayman, 1 for Korpisalo, sometimes maybe 4 Swayman, 1 Korpisalo. Maybe we see more of a 2-1 split between these two goaltenders, at least until Swayman really figures it out. But just on Boston in general, this does not look like the Bruins to me, Nick. Are we finally seeing the year where maybe this Big Four in the Atlantic could get broken up? Like, we know Florida looks good. Toronto looks good to me. I think Tampa's going to find a way to hang around. But is this finally the year that we maybe see a spot open up for an Ottawa or one of these Chase teams? Because Boston just does not look right to me right now.
I was just going to say, I feel like you want to talk. You want me to talk about Ottawa and Buffalo. I can't get to that level. The track record, Jake, is big enough, long enough for me to suggest the Boston Bruins are going to find their way out of this. Whether it's a coaching change that springs them, personnel on that roster, they still have a couple gamers. I think we can both agree the depth isn't there. Elias Lindholm, after a good start, he's been nowhere to be found offensively. McAvoy's off to a slow start. Like, left and right, everywhere you look on that roster, hasn't been the same Bruin we've seen in the past. And then you compound that with the fact that the goaltending, I mean, there's got to be some concern there with Swayman. We talked about Korpisalo, Pete. He's been a much different story so far this season, which is good news considering where he was last year at this time with the Ottawa Senators, right, Petey?
Guys, I was just checking. Edge stats alert. Joonas Korpisalo leads the NHL with a .909 high danger save percentage. Can you believe that? Putting a little pressure and heat on Swayman. I mean, Swayman made such a case for all this money. He deserved it, but a little bit slow out of the gate.
Oh, no, Swayman doesn't look right. And our guy, one of our main guys, Pete Blackburn. We all love Pete Blackburn. He's a huge Bruins fan. He's got the bye-bye Monty watch set in motion. He wants Monty out. He wanted him gone yesterday, Nick. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's interesting to me because, okay, you want Montgomery out. Who do you replace him with? Like, I wondered about that going into this season. Every year we talk about the coaching changes. Seems like every season there's more and more. But the carousel, when does it stop, Jake? Like, I think teams will be smarter with their decisions, and especially Boston. You look at the track record there. It'd be tough for me to let go of Montgomery, but teams are always looking for that jump, right?
Well, they're looking for that sugar rush, but I think it would be more short-term than anything, right? You fire Montgomery, you bring in fill-in-the-blank coach, and yeah, I could see it maybe sparking the team for a little bit, but if you're talking trying to win a Stanley Cup, long-term fix, that's gotta come on the actual roster. Like, I just don't, I can't watch this team, and you can't sell me that they're going to win, 3 rounds of playoff hockey to make the Stanley Cup final and beat these teams in the Atlantic Division the way that they're constructed. It kind of just feels like everybody's looking at Pasta to score goals, and there's just nobody else on this roster. Like, how many Bruins would you think right now, Nick, are you would want on your fantasy roster up front outside of Pastrnak? Okay, Marchand, sure, but outside of that, is there anybody on that roster you'd even have interest in?
Not really. Not even McAvoy. It's slim pickings. They can't score goals and they can't make saves right now. Like, I'm completely out on the Boston Bruins in terms of fantasy. In real life, I think they're going to figure things out, but I think there's got to be some course correction here. Again, the sample size is too extensive for me to be like, this team's finished. I still think there's gamers on that roster. I just think they're going to have to scratch and claw, a bit more than they did in the last couple years, where it was like they were in the playoffs by game 60. It's a lot of a different story here.
they're not a team that you just want to give up on, or organization that you just want to give up on, right? Because they have been so consistent. It's just, to me, it feels different this year watching them. They're losing games, and I'm watching it and I'm thinking, man, this just doesn't look like the Bruins whatsoever to me. So look, maybe something clicks, maybe they find some combinations or somebody steps up in that lineup, but they just don't have a lot of guys that really scare you right now. I think the angle moving forward might continue just to be play the Bruins unders, because I think if they're going to win games, they're going to have to lean on that blue line. Swayman hopefully play a little bit better, get some good starts out of Korpisalo. I don't think they're going to outscore opponents. So, lean into that defense, start to win games 3-1. I think that's the way Boston can turn this around.
I know you guys are paying attention. In the last week alone on this podcast, I gave 2 unders, and they both included Boston and St. Louis playing each other. You can fill in the blanks on that front. Both 3-2 games, by the way. Only 4 guys in NHL.com's top 200 rankings, by the way, right now for Boston: Pasternak, Marchand, McAvoy, and Swayman. Maybe a changing of the guard. We'll see as the season moves forward. Here we go again. This is the same conversation every podcast, but the crease concerns. Everybody's hurt. Again, Alexander Georgiev out, Darcy Kemper out, Freddie Anderson out long-term. Kochetkov, I think they dodged a bullet there. Missed 1 game, back in the mix. He'll be a bit of a tandem here with Spencer Martin. Even Sam Ersson with Philadelphia. Like, there is major league concerns across the league, but thankfully, Jake, there are some options. I like Jake Allen this season. He's been fantastic. 4-2-1, 2.30, 916. And we gotta spread some love here for Dustin Wolf. Off to a really good start. 6-2-1, 2.53, 921. Dare I say colder?
I got another one for you as well, just maybe more of a short-term option, but Cal Pickard in Edmonton with a busy week coming up. Maybe he gets a couple of starts. I know there's a back-to-back in there. So I would look to Cal Pickard, at least for some short-term help while some of these guys are on the shelf. And obviously Skinner hasn't really played exactly that well either, so maybe he can steal some starts even as the season goes on. Unfortunate for Georgiev, Nick, because it did feel like he was starting to turn things around a little bit, so I hope it's nothing long-term there. I wanted to get into the Canes goaltending with you, though, a little bit. Obviously, Frederik Andersen doesn't sound like we're going to see him anytime soon. Kochetkov, you mentioned it. Lucky that it's just short term if you're a Kochetkov owner, so he gets back out there. But, concerns about him being able to handle a big workload. Are we interested in Spencer Martin? I think he's worth a flyer for the time being to see if he sticks with this team. He comes up and gets the shutout on Saturday. I think he's a guy I would scoop off the waiver wire right now and just kind of see where this thing goes.
Yeah, I think they'll be very careful. To your first question about Kochetkov, I think just the injury patterns with this guy, you can't play him every game. They did play him for an extensive period of time, and then he got hurt, right? And I think the more and more Spencer Martin proves that he can play at the NHL level, the more opportunity he's going to get. Like, let's not forget, he's at a point in his NHL career around the age of 30 where he's got to figure this out, like a la Anthony Stolarz, I should say. If he can't, then he's going to be labeled as a career minor leaguer, maybe like a third-string guy, right? So I think this is the biggest moment of Spencer Martin's career, and I would tell you right now, like, that's a pretty good system to play behind. I know he had a solid weekend, but I think if the results are there, I think you continue to trot him out there, and I think Carolina will look more like a tandem look, maybe a bit more in favor of Kochetkov, but I don't think it's the right play to play Kochetkov every game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there will obviously be that lean towards Kochetkov, but like you mentioned, Carolina creates such a good environment for these goaltenders. You could put producer Bobby in net, and I would pick him
True.
up. Like I just think that they do create this great environment for anybody that gets out there. So Spencer Martin, even though you might look at the name and go, who the heck is Spencer Martin? He comes out, gets the shutout on Saturday. Kochetkov, they give up 1 goal in 2 games combined over the weekend. So this team just tends to play well in front of goaltenders. I'd have interest no matter who's playing there.
Jake, some further injury reaction around the league, and there's some big ones, namely in Minnesota with Joel Eriksson Ek and Matt Zuccarello out long-term. Anaheim's got a 3-pack of injuries: Fabry, Fowler, McTavish. Chicago with Seth Jones, Seth Jarvis with the Carolina Hurricanes. Where do you want to start on the injury fronts here?
Well, I mean, it's not that sexy, but you mentioned Seth Jones. Like, do we look to a Vlasic on the back end? I don't know. It's kind of gross. It's more of a deep league play just because Chicago doesn't exactly score a lot, but maybe that offense can click a little bit. He can pick up some power play time. I think the most significant one, though, is Zuccarello, because we have a timeline for it. Sounds like it's going to be, 3 to 4 weeks? The guy had surgery 2 minutes after the game, it sounded like. Yeah. So clearly they got to this quick, and I think Zuccarello is one of the most underrated fantasy assets in the league. He just produces every single year. Great part of this Wild start. They've been off to a good start, so that one hurts a little bit, Nick. I don't know if there's anybody in that Wild lineup you're looking at to maybe elevate in the absence of Zuccarello.
Well, I was going to say the only positive to come of this rash of injuries for Minnesota is I think it's going to help the file for Kirill Kaprizov to win the Hart Trophy this season. If they can stay afloat without a guy like Zuccarello and obviously Joel Eriksson Ek, that's going to be good news, I think, for that file. They're even moving Matt Boldy up the middle. Like, it's going to be a tough look right now. Ryan Hartman's another guy I expect maybe to get a boost in sort of play here. But those are two tough injuries for Minnesota. You're right on Vlasic in Chicago. Look, I'm not jumping to the wire to pick up Alex Vlasic. We just talk about the struggles of Connor Bedard. That has to continue, especially without their number one defenseman. I'd look externally for replacement options there. Olin Zellweger with Anaheim, 3-point outing versus Detroit over the weekend. Travis Anaheim has 5 points in the last 2. And Bowen Byram, 7 points in the last 8. It's funny how the narrative has changed and flipped a bit on that Middlestat Byram trade, eh?
Well, Zellweger's a good shout. I'm glad you brought him up because he's been kind of sneaky. No one's really talking about him yet, so he might still be available in a lot of leagues. He's starting to get that shot off a little bit. Buffalo could be tricky to figure out with that back end situation, so I don't mind Zellweger at all out there in Anaheim. And like you mentioned, they've got a rash of injuries right now. I'm waiting for someone in that lineup to step up. It was good to see Cutter Gauthier finally get his first NHL goal, so maybe we give him a look. He's still readily available in a lot of leagues, but Mason McTavish lands on the IR, and this Ducks team just not a lot of sexy there in Anaheim right now.
They stink. That's my breakdown of Anaheim. Another lost season for them. They're 6-8-2. I'm calling it for the Anaheim Ducks already. Let's get to the schedule. Pete Jensen coming up in mere moments. November 18th to 24th. 6 games Monday, 7 on Tuesday, 5 on Wednesday, 10 on Thursday, 5 for Friday, 15 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday. A 46-game total. The 4-game teams you want to look at, as you referenced earlier on, Edmonton, busy week for them, San Jose and Utah. And then the 2-game teams you want to stay away from, LA, Montreal, Nashville, Jersey, Seattle, Toronto, and Vancouver. Anything stick out for you on that front, Jake?
Well, the schedule is going to be tricky the next couple of weeks, Nick. Like you mentioned, it's not exactly balanced this week, and then next week we get American Thanksgiving, so that's going to throw things off a little bit as well. So I think makes it more important in your matchups over the next couple of weeks to manipulate that schedule, find teams that are playing on those off nights a little bit. I did mention earlier, Cal Pickard with a lot of games for Edmonton coming up. I think he'd be a nice little piece for your goaltending situation, get a couple starts on a team that likes to win a lot of games.
Petey, we talked about the crease. We talked about a call last week. I said Logan Thompson revenge. What does he do? He goes into Vegas, gets that revenge victory. But the sidebar story, obviously, Alex Ovechkin. But Logan Thompson's been a great at this year.
Oh, yeah, he has been. I mean, how about him requesting a trade out of Vegas, saying he wants to be a number one, going to Washington, a team that I thought had a pretty decent starting goaltender in Charlie Lindgren, but he has really solidified himself, Logan Thompson, as the number one in DC right now, and he's benefiting. He's got a great record, only like 1 loss this year, because he's benefiting from all these great stories. Alexei Protas, top 15 in even strength points. Connor McMichael tied with Draisaitl for the NHL lead in even strength goals. Ovi, you mentioned the fountain of youth. He's discovered it. And then even the defense has Chychrun back, right? So it's just getting even stronger and more upward trajectory in DC right now.
What have you made of the new look, old look Colorado Avalanche, Pete, that they're finally back and they've got that top 6, healthy, ready to go, Nichushkin, Drouin? What do you make of that moving forward?
I think most of the league fears that lineup on a night-to-night basis. Like, right, Philly's going to play them coming up. Philly's won 3 in a row. Fedotov playing well. We know that. But, hey, you're looking at a beast there in Colorado. Remember what they did to Connor Hellebuck? They made him look weak in the first round of the playoffs, peppering him with high-danger chances. We're going to start seeing more of that elite Colorado Avalanche offense, and you're going to want to tap into the Jonathan Drouins. We know that Nichushkin's already picked up in most leagues, but this team is a juggernaut, and they're going to start looking a little bit more like it soon.
Petey, who's the player you said is playing well? Say his name again.
Ivan Fedotov. Filling in for Sam Ersson in Philly. Philly just beat Ottawa, Buffalo, and Tampa, all fringe playoff teams last week. So that's a good way to get right back into the wild card race, right, guys?
Fedotov. All right, let's get that name in the rotation, Nick. I like it. Fedotov.
Yeah, they got a bunch of Russians right now in Philadelphia. Even, I think it's interesting, their crease situation, but I think it's up there for the taking. But, Pete, I think you make a good point. Somebody's got to step up to the table and grab a couple of those roster or those standing spots, the wild card spots in the Eastern Conference, whether it's the New York Islanders, Philadelphia, Buffalo, the Ottawa Senators. You talk about the Sabres. Ryan McLeod is on your list this week.
Right. I was looking based on 5-on-5 goals for line trios. The line of Jordan Greenway, who I know is banged up, Ryan McLeod, and Jason Zucker. Not a great line at the surface, but top 10, top 15 in the league in even strength goals as a trio. You look at Buffalo, how are they hanging around? Their top 6 looks terrible this year, right? Especially with Tage Thompson out and Ukko Pekka-Luukkonen. I mean, like, their lineup looks like it's in shambles, but they're getting elite level production from that line led by McLeod, who's filling in on the top line right now for Tage Thompson, but he's expected to come back on Wednesday. But then also the defensemen. You mentioned Byram, Dahlin, and Power, all in double digits in points. Is there another blue line out there that has 3 in double digits so far? I can't think of one right now. Really impressive depth scoring. That's keeping them afloat right now.
Speaking of guys getting top 6 roles, Pete, you've got Bobby McMahon on your list. I love this guy. I actually streamed him on Saturday. Felt very smart. 2-goal game. Are we a short-term play? Are we a long-term play on Bobby McMahon? I like what I see from this guy on a nightly basis.
Well, he's playing with John Tavares with Auston Matthews on the shelf for the time being, and JT looks a little reinvigorated here. Maybe this is something where Matthews took the C from him. Now he has the spotlight while Matthews is out. He's taken his game to another level. Looks like vintage Islanders Tavares to me right now. And Bobby McMahon, even before that 2-goal game, had 14 shots on goal over a 2-game span. So you knew he was cooking. You knew it was coming. We had him in our picks. He delivered over the weekend. So yeah, maybe give him a glimpse, because even when Matthews comes back, the left wings right now, there's McMahon, there's Matthew Nyes, both looking like must-roster fantasy players at the moment.
Opportunity as well. Max Pacioretty banged up, so somebody on the left side is going to get a marquee assignment there in the top 6 for the Maple Leafs. Anybody else you want to bring up in terms of the waiver wire list this week, Pete?
Well, I like what Eza Lindell's doing down in Dallas. He's in the top 4. Hasn't really been fantasy relevant in years past, but he's been chipping in. And Dallas's offense overall, Mason Marchment stole the show this past week. Guy's got 9 points in his past 3 games, had the 5-point game, one of the stars of the week, on the fantasy team of the week, must roster in all formats. That's another line I wanted to bring up. The line of Tyler Seguin, Matt Duchene, who's well better than a point per game, and Mason Marchment. That has to be one of the best lines in the NHL this year on a per-game basis. A couple of those guys have missed a couple of games here and there over the course of the season. That has become Dallas's best line so far this year. Not good news for the Robertson and Hintz and Wyatt Johnston owners out there.
My patience is wearing thin a bit on some of those guys in Dallas, especially what we expected from some of these guys. We talked about Robertson last week. Stankoven's off to a pretty decent start. I think he'll be in the running for the Calder Trophy. But, Jake, last year, Wyatt Johnston, every game, it was like 6 shots on goal, 2 points. Different story this season.
Can't figure this team out. I mean, it's tough to trust any of their player props on a night-to-night basis, or any of them really in fantasy, but you're going to get those pop weeks, right? And it's good. Wyatt Johnston's going to have a week this year where we're like, wow, this guy's snapping. He's got 6 points this week, a bunch of shots. So it's going to be tough to predict on a week-to-week basis, but I do love Stankoven. He's probably the one guy I still play the shot prop for most nights.
Fair enough. Just on Carolina, too, Seth Jarvis, we talked about the upper body injury. Don't sleep on the name Eric Robinson. The guy's an NHL journeyman, had a couple points on Sunday for Carolina. We always talk about the depth on that roster, and there's a couple different guys that would look at for injury replacements there. The betting slate. So I mentioned a 46-game slate in general this week in the NHL. Monday's card intrigues me a bit here. I like the Edmonton-Montreal game specifically. Give me Connor McDavid over 1.5. I think Montreal's a very beatable team. Edmonton's going to be a bit hotter than the collar after losing that game in Toronto. McDavid's on fire, so I like over 1.5 in that game. And give me the over between Detroit and San Jose, Jake, over 6.5. They've played to the over in 3 of the past 4 meetings. And don't forget the Jake Wallman revenge game there.
I don't mind the over in that Edmonton-Montreal game that you brought up. I mean, if McDavid's going to cook, that means we're going to get a little bit of offense. I think Montreal could score a couple, assuming it's Stuart Skinner for Edmonton. But it could be Cal Pickard. They do have a back-to-back here, so we'll see what they do between the pipes. But either way, I think Montreal could maybe score a couple. Maybe we look to the Cole Caulfield anytime goal as well. Bruins under. Nick, I had to do it. They're playing Monday night. They got Columbus in town. I think you try to lean on the defense here and lock it down a little bit. This is a winnable get-right spot for the Boston Bruins, so maybe they find a way to win this one and keep it low-scoring and tight.
I wonder if they give the Corpedo a revenge start there against Columbus, but I did reference Jake Wallman. If you want to get cute with it, maybe you look at a point prop there for Jake Wallman playing Detroit for the first time since the offseason trade there. Tuesday's card, there's a couple I'm looking at as well. You talk about the Oilers on the back-to-back. Give me the Ottawa Senators money line in that game. The Sens, I've gone to that well far too many times this season, but they need to find a way to win these types of games, and I think they'll compete at the very least in that one. And Florida at Winnipeg, this is going to be an unpopular decision, Jake. I'm going back to Florida. I think the Jets are going to get in a bit of a rut here.
I was about to ask you, do you have a take on this game? Like, do we play the Winnipeg bounce back angle, or do you just say, hey, this is when it's starting to cool off a little bit, and Florida's going to flex their muscles? And I think watching that game over the weekend, it looked like the Panthers knew exactly who was coming into town. They're like, we want to show you who the top dog, who the top cat is, I should say, in the league right now. And the Panthers just did that. So I'm going to go the other way. I think Winnipeg bounces back in this one, though. I think they find a way on home ice to get one back against the Cats.
You guys just breezed right through that Monday slate without coming to old Bob Bender. I'm taking a look at the Avalanche. The price is high, but how about a little puck line action? Avalanche over the Flyers. I like Colorado on a Monday.
I feel you, Bobby. I feel like that game could get ugly, like 6-0 or something big from Colorado.
You just pumped your boy Fedotov the whole podcast. Now he's going to get lit up.
But the first match,
I think Kolosov is starting. So
okay, there you go.
There you go. Okay, so we dodged the bullet there. I also wanted to mention the New York Islanders. A lot of injuries, right? Duclair's out, Barzal's out. Sneaky production right now. Kyle Palmieri, 16 points in 18 games. Get all over him in the props market. And then who's the other one? I mean, I think like J.G. Pajot playing on the top line. He's been sprinkling in some points as well. Nobody's going to really be flocking to that team. They're not trending in the right direction overall, but they're getting some sneaky offense from those two guys. Pajot's playing the wing right now.
All right, boys. Excellent job today. We'll reconvene coming up on Thursday for the Week 7 Mailbag Edition. Thank you to producer Bob Bender.
We'll have the wonderful Christopher Meany on.
Oh, yes.
He's now an official National Hockey League employee, and he'll be sprinkled in a lot of these wagering segments, and we'll get his input on the fantasy world as well, Nick.
Looking forward to that. So Chris Meany coming up on Thursday's episode. Again, as mentioned, many thanks to producer Bob Bender. You're here right there. Pete Jensen, Jay Kahn. I'm Nick Alberga. You've been listening to NHL Fantasy on Ice, delivered by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip.